Hello, welcome to the November 18th, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase at steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed depending on the number of questions that come in. We will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. And if you don't see an immediate response to your question, we will go through them in order. So if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's 13, 14, or 15, which level, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information would be helpful. Also, which operating system that you're running on. So if you're running on Mac OS or Windows, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all of the topics that are asked in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to Club Cubase at Steinberg, go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan for creating that wonderful website. So again, cubaseindex.com, where you could search through over 42,000 different topics that we've covered in live streams. So you can navigate directly to an area after searching. Once we work with that, we also have two people that serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. We have Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're, once again, not Steinberg employees. They do it out of the goodness of their hearts to make it a better community experience. So we want to give a special shout out to them. We'll give extra kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. And that's a wonderful resource of information that's available for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. Just one quick programming note. I have to do another seminar starting in about 4 hours. I'll see if I get the link in time that I'll share it in the live stream, but we'll be doing kind of a Cubase 15 webinar right after the live stream ends. So I'm going to wrap up the live stream at about 3.5 hours instead of our usual 4 hours, so I can get a drink of water and do my technical checks for the webinar. And I'll see if I get the link. I will share it in the chat field so people want to pop over and see some Cubase 15, like a Cubase 15 demo. You're more than welcome to migrate over. One other quick programming note. 1 week from today will be the 25th. That will be the last live stream of the month because the 28th is a holiday in the United States. So 1 week from today, we'll do our customary 2-hour live stream followed by a Zoom social meetup afterwards. So that will be a week from Tuesday. No, it's not. That will be the last live stream of the month. And we'll have our normal live streams today and on Friday. So with that, let's go ahead and get started answering questions. All right, so we see from Dwight Cunningham. He says, hello, Greg, DC checking in from Bahamas. It says, Greg, I have SQL LE on DVD. I installed on my PC, but was not able to use it. An e-licenser issue. So yeah, so SQL is not, if you have an existing license that's authorized, you could run it and install it. So, but that's going to be utilizing the e-licenser, and that server was shut down earlier this year, like in April-ish. So you're not going to be able to authorize SQL on a new computer, but SQL has been discontinued maybe 10, maybe 15 years, maybe 17 years. So, but a lot of the great content that comes with SQL is part of Cubase, and a lot of the functionality has also been migrated into Cubase as well. So, all right, next question. See, Dwight Cunningham is just saying, Greg, I'm enjoying Cubase 15. Very powerful. Thanks. Great. Glad to hear that. All right. We see Jazz Dude on. We see Vince 5E checking in from Winnipeg, Canada. Great to see you on. We have Stefan from Sweden. Bratman Studios has a question. Hi, Greg. I'm considering a Mac Studio M4 with 64 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage and an external hard drive with an Asus Pro 32-inch monitor. I think I'll be bulletproof for the next 5 to 10 years. I think that's a great system to get for longevity. So I think you'll notice a huge change in performance going from your iMac to that. So look forward to hearing about your new computer after you get it up and running. All right. So we see Jan from Cubase Index on. We see Jason Sykes joining from South Yorkshire, England. Thanks for being part of the community today. All right. Sorry. We see Arjun Van Edinger. Says, hello, Greg, from the Netherlands region, Gouda. Yeah, the cheese city. So thanks for joining us today. I got to go to the Netherlands one time when I was visiting Germany. Enjoyed the trip there. All right, we see John Barry joining from England. We see Sue saying, morning, Greg. Thanks. Great to see you back on. All right, so we see Peter just sending greetings from Montreal, Canada. Trust you're still having a wonderful week so far. Thanks for joining us. Hope you got thawed out from all the snow from last week's live stream. All right, Regulo Hernandez saying saludos desde Margarita, Venezuela. Thanks for joining us. Taxi Williams Music says, hi, Greg. Cubase 15 is not auto-selecting newly created instrument tracks when dragging and dropping from the browser. Do you know if they're working on an update to fix this? So if you want to see this in action, so if I grab, for instance, a Groove Agent SE and I drag it here, the track itself is not automatically selected like it was in previous versions. I did report that. I don't have any access to see what the status of that, but I did bring that to the attention of Steinberg for that. So we see from Ness, hi Greg, is there a shortcut for application scaling? Thanks. I'm not sure if there's a particular shortcut, but we'll take a look. I know you could use shortcuts for the plugin scaling. Let me see if that is at all workable. Let me come over here. I think I used it in all right, so there's a user interface scaling, and this might be just for plugins, but let me. So if I come over here, I could use like the MIDI remote to scale, but I'm not sure if that's for the application. But let me just look at the category. Yeah, so I think it's just going to be for the particular plugins, but let me just look under the preferences. So we come over here, I think it's going to be, we go to the user interface. Yeah, so I think it's the only key command is going to be not for the overall user interface. I think most people, once they have that set, would leave it set in the current position, but plugins you may want to zoom in and out of the appearance if you want to see like parameters more clearly. So there's a keyboard shortcut for that, but not the application scaling that I know of. All right, John Barry just says enjoying Cubase Pro 15 on Windows 11. Thanks for letting us know. All right, we have VST Aeronova joining from Amsterdam. All right, Ed Pacheco just says, hi, Ed from Massachusetts. Cubase 15 Pro PC. Show exactly the new voice AI works, adding a singing voice. Okay, so okay, so one of the plugins that comes with Cubase 15 is going to be Omnivocal. So let me come over here. I can just, so you have your choice between kind of male or female singers. You have control over dynamics, if you want to be dynamic or very straight. How much expression, you could kind of add presence, adjust the output, formants. And when we come to a MIDI melody, what we would do is just come over here. So once we have this loaded as a virtual instrument on the particular track, as we look at the MIDI data, so I'll just make the, so, and once we select a note, so as we listen to kind of a note here, we'll see a text field here within the toolbar list, right? So the info bar. So as we type those particular notes in, I could just say, I know what you sing in the shower. I know how it sounds when you weep. I know what you pray for. So as we kind of listen to this, I know what you say in your sleep, 'cause I know you. So if we wanted to kind of tweak like the melody, so say like, and I could just kind of type the word you with like, and when we look at the text for that particular phrase, to show it to you, I'll just put a couple of dashes at the end. So we could just say, okay. And if I wanted that note to last longer in the voice, I could just change me to my core. We could say, okay, I just want to make this shorter. The word core. Change me to my core. Or if we would want to make this longer. Again, so all you have to do is once you have that plugin loaded, you could kind of, as you're kind of entering notes in and listening to pitch, you'll get kind of like a you know, basic wave. Change me to my core. I don't have to worry, wonder where you are. Right here in the center of my heart. So kind of play around with that. So just within the MIDI editor itself, just come here and then you could just enter the text in. And as soon as you do that, then you can have your kind of your virtual vocalist. So it's a great addition to Cubase 15. All right, John Barry says looking forward to the webinar. Yeah, I don't have a link for it yet, so if I get one, I'll share it with everyone. But if you have a link, John, you know, share it with the group. I'd appreciate it. Okay, so FlyV says, I'm new in using NCH Suite. How can I mix a master track into a video just using just a cover photo? So I think, I'm not familiar with the NCH, but I think if you wanted to, and it's not necessarily a Cubase function, but let's say if we go to WaveLab here, all right, so let's just say, all right, so if we're here and we go to metadata tab, so say we want to edit the metadata, that I think if we come over here that we could put in that we could put a picture file right here and have that as metadata within a file, but it's not done on Cubase. It would be kind of done inside of WaveLab for that. So if you go, once you have the file in WaveLab here, go to the metadata and click on edit. And if you go to like ID3/iTunes, you could see kind of different fields for metadata. One of them, you could have the lyrics or picture automatically associated with the file, but it's not done. Cubase doesn't have that functionality. And you could always get a WaveLab trial as well if you needed to do it for a quick project. Let me know if that's okay for you, Vince, or if I misunderstood. All right, Mike Air says, what's up, Mr. Greg? Cubase 14 Pro, could you show how to make a song sound seamlessly from one to the next? I'm doing an album and some songs to sound like one song. All right. Okay, so let's do new project here. All right, so let me just put a couple tracks in here. All right, so let's say we have all of these on one track. Okay, so right now I just imported a bunch of songs, and let's just kind of listen to like the transitions here at the end. All right, and let's say we want that next song to start right at the cursor position, so we'll go ahead and so I'm going to take this file here, and I'm going to just copy this particular, so let's say I want it to be right there. So I'm going to take my snap off, because right now it was snapping this to go directly to the bar, and I want to get in between the bar. So now I want to take that now. If we have, if you do this, you may run into like you may hear a little click or pop depending on the transition. So what you could do is just hit the X key. So let's just select like a small region here and X that. So, and that will do a crossfade. And let's check kind of the end of this song. Okay, so again, I will come right over here and just eyeballing it. So we hit the X key again, so let's say if you wanted that crossfade to be shorter, what I could do is just select the particular crossfade, and if you wanted to adjust kind of the position, the length of the crossfade, so now we can just come right over here and let's check the end of this song going into the next song. If you didn't want necessarily like a crossfade for that, we could just say
let me let you know what I'm about. Let you know what I'm about.
So let's check this transition again. And sometimes like we have a pickup note on beat 4. So let's say if we're doing this 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we wanted to transition, we can maybe place that on beat 4. So as this is fading out, it's still kind of in the musical. And transitions right into the next song. So if we were kind of just check some of these transitions again that we made for our album project. Check the transitions. So if you wanted to crossfade, it's probably a little longer than I would do, but just for example. And then check. So some different techniques is sometimes you may want to have it do a crossfade. You may want it to fit in like musically, like rhythmically with the previous song, but those are some techniques that you could use to like seamlessly transition different songs like an album project. All right, so we see Sue just has Cubase 15 Pro Mac. I see Pro on iPad 16 key commands, insert length missing, useful for score editor. I don't have my iPad handy, but you know, most of the things that are assignable. So let's say if we are in score editor, all right, and basically we want to just kind of set the insert length. So as we come over here, we could, let's say if we currently have quarter notes selected, and so if we come over to key commands, all right, so we have option, I think it's, so if you hold down the Alt or Option key, you can just simply, and hit 1 on the QWERTY keyboard. So 1 would be for whole notes, half, 2, 3's quarter, etc. So you could just kind of navigate. I'll dig out my iPad and see if that is a particular function that's not available. I would think that most keyboard shortcut functions are available, but you know, occasionally some of them may not be, but I'll take a look at it and get my iPad out. My son has it in his room, two stories up, but I'd be happy to kind of check that out and see if it's in there. All right, Peter is asking, I stepped away from my PC last time the Zoom meet was scheduled. Is the Zoom link available post live stream? If so, how can it be accessed? So generally, we don't record the Zooms, and that way everyone's kind of probably a little freer to discuss different things. So we don't record the Zoom meetings. We can if people want to. But so we didn't record the last one, so generally it's just a live thing. So I recorded some when we've had like artists who were on. I recorded for Tim Hinckley and Teddy Riley. I sent over because they had requested it. But generally we don't record the Zooms, but if people want us to record the Zoom live streams, I'm happy to do that and share it. But we don't have the live stream from the last one, but we'll be doing again on next 1 week from today. All right, Mark Winslow is saying aloha from Honolulu. Thanks for joining us early in the morning. All right, we have Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands, and his cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to all the other pets nearby. Let's see, my cat is asleep in my office hanging out. All right, Peter is asking if anyone was affected by the Cloudflare outage earlier today. All right, we see Okay, so we see from FlyV just as recently got Backbone, and wow, what a custom drum editor. So yeah, all right. We have Emmanuel on from, is it NoniG TV or NoniG TV? All right, Rick France says, hi Greg and all, hope your Tuesday's great. Smacking the like button, always learned something from these. All right, so we see Sue just says, emailed you about a secondary screen, doesn't carry over zones. Also in the score editor, the second screen doesn't allow access to top score editing menu, Mac Mini M4. You know, I tested this, I was at a show and I had a chance to use an external TV and I tested this. And let me know if you're using kind of the same display resolution or on, because everything was kind of showing up, all the menus and stuff were showing up as expected. Sometimes with different monitors, depending on the display resolution, you might have to actually adjust the, like sometimes you may have to physically adjust kind of the image within the screen to make sure that those are becoming, that all the information that's being sent to the screen isn't like a little bit outside of the viewable area. So, but, and also let me know what resolution you're running as well. But when I tested it, everything seemed to be working as expected. All right, Bratman Studio says, hey Greg, I've been reading that Cubase is having problems with Tahoe OS 26X, 26.x. Do you know the best Mac OS for Cubase 15? So I think that there's a lot of third-party components that still need to be updated. So often those are kind of causing problems for Cubase. I'm running Sequoia. I tend personally not to update the operating system on my computers if I don't have to. I try to stay with the operating system that was on a computer when I did that. On my personal computer, I did jump up from Windows 10 to 11. And I just wanted to, and I did it with the premise of I'm just going to kind of start the computer from scratch again and just reinstall everything. Because my personal computer was probably migrated, like the hard drive has been migrated from 4 different computers. So it was about time to do that. But generally, I stick with whatever operating system is on my system. I'm using Sequoia, I believe. So I'll just check. So yeah, so I'm running Sequoia. That's been very stable, and I think there's still a lot of things that are getting updated for Tahoe, and it's kind of par for the course with Mac OS. All right, we see Soren is popping in for a short time. He's going to check the replay. Memento says whack the like button to everyone. All right, Barton is asking, how can I hear a sound if I place a MIDI note? All right, so let's say I have an instrument loaded here. Say we'll go to Writing Room Synths. All right, so let's say we have this as an active. All right, so when we want to write notes in, we want to hear. So I think if we see this a little, you'll see like a little speaker icon in the key editor. Let me just try it without. So, all right, but you may, let's say if we go to full screen here, we may see like the little preview. Okay, the acoustic feedback. So it's going to be like this little icon. So let me tuck this down in the lower zone. All right, so look for this icon, the acoustic feedback. So now as I enter in MIDI notes, I don't hear it. Now, when that icon is enabled, so without that icon enabled, we don't hear the notes. Turn this on, then you should hear the notes. Give that a try, Mark or Martin, let me know. All right, Mark Winslow just says, I can't receive Dante from TF3 after upgrading to 15 Pro. Manually allowed Cubase 15 through Windows 11 firewall. Hints to problem. So, check to see, if you're getting it in the, in the Dante virtual sound card driver. So see if you're getting signal there. I would always check your audio setup here. Make sure, one, that you have it set for, I'm not sure if you're using a Dante virtual sound card or a Dante accelerator card, but if you have that set up for your Dante virtual sound card would be my guess, but I don't want to assume. And also make sure that these particular, once, and check your Dante patch to make sure that all the inputs are available. But then you should be able to just kind of add, make sure that in your inputs that these are connected, and it's connected going into your Dante virtual sound card or your Dante accelerator card on the inputs. So check that. All right, Alexander Plasko says, hi Greg, welcome back. Thanks. It was great to see so many old friends in San Francisco at the Music Expo show. We had a great presentation from Chingshan Chang, film composer. All right, his question is, why did they add a modifier key to rename things in the arranger key? You used to be able to just double click. Now key plus double click. I think the arranger chain has always been that way, so I don't think it's changed. So if you're not familiar with this, let's add an arranger track. All right, so we define kind of sections of a song, say verse, chorus, bridge, whatever. So here, if you want to name the arranger tracks, just hold down the Alt or Option key. And I think that's been that way since the arranger track was introduced in SX3. So I don't think that's changed behavior at all. So I'm not sure why you need a modifier key, but it's, as far as I remember, it's always been just Alt or Option plus double click to rename the event. So I don't believe the behavior has changed at all on that. So it's just being maintained. John Barry says, I like the way OmniVocal can automatically put a phrase over several notes. It's really cool, and automating power and attack controls can be quite expressive. All right, we have Raw Justice Hip Hop says, hi Greg, it's your neighbor checking in from Capitol Heights, Maryland. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you're well. All right, so we see Tim K says that AI Uncanny Valley is still too wide for me. I can see the value as a tool for composing, I guess, but since a singer can't follow a MIDI pattern too, seems a little gimmicky. I think it's also great for, there's lots of people, and we've had this discussion on Zoom meetups, a lot of people that are great musicians that have to work with singers. I think Soren, Soren68 has mentioned, has kind of brought this up as a discussion point on Zoom socials. Is it, if you can't sing, do you want to try to, have the best mock-up so that when a singer comes in, that they have a good idea of what you're trying to accomplish and they could, improve upon the performance? Or, So that's a great use for it. Just like, and Soren had made a great point, is like some people are very defensive about kind of AI vocal solutions, but don't have any problems programming drums or replacing drummers or an organ player or piano player in MIDI. So, I think it's a great tool. So in a lot of genres, it's perfectly fine for a lead vocal, but for someone to be able to communicate a musical idea as accurately as possible to someone that's coming in, and we see this with film composers who try to have it as high and accurate mock-up as possible, so that when they're performing with the orchestra and the orchestrator can actually get a really good sense of what the composer is trying to accomplish. So we don't have to try to recreate that magic, so that all of those performances can be used as like a guideline if needed for like a real performance, or often they could stand on their own. So I think it's a great solution, and I'm someone who doesn't sing well, so I like to be able to have a song and I could program MIDI really well, and I could come up with great results, and send it to my singer friend and say, you have to come in and do better than this. And so I think it's a cool tool to have in the arsenal within Cubase. All right, Raw Justice Hip Hop says there's some useful features in Cubase 15. Unfortunately, I already handle those needs with third-party applications. And I think what happens a lot of times, when you're relying on third-party applications, sometimes you get into, I often refer to it as version-itis, or Cubase is updated for the latest operating system, but the third-party tools aren't. We went through this with, VST2 and VST3 plugins, and whenever there's a new operating system, there's always a chance that the development cycles of plugins and third-party tools don't, coincide with a timely release of an updated host application. And I think also when we look at the level of integration between the different sources as well. So, you could program drums in a drum machine and have it synchronize, and then, capture the audio from that into Cubase to include in your final mixdown, or you could just use the pattern editor and do it all internally. And then I want to take the pattern editor and copy it to other areas, and I want this pattern to alternate playing forward and backwards. So the level of integration with the tools, I think, is also superior to having a third-party solution often. All right. Great to see Brian Sawyer checking in from Yuma, Arizona. We hope you're recovering and able to play guitar soon. All right. Ed Pacheco just says, thank you. Thanks for joining us today, being part of the community. All right. So FlyV just says, I'm getting WaveLab now. Thanks. Great to see Da Vinci Girl saying hello from Bochum, Germany. I think I'm pronouncing that right, but let me know if I'm not. All right, Eustace Peters. Anthony here says, I noticed I accidentally tried to add a VST instrument on a disabled track, Cubase in 14:15. It crashes. All right, so I'm not sure if you're adding a VST instrument, so let me see if I could recreate that. So let's go to, let's say I have my instrument track here, my Halion Sonic. I'm going to disable that. All right, and let's see if I come over here. Let's get to our VSTi rack. So I'm not sure how you're switching the instrument. So let's, says, I notice if you accidentally add a VST instrument on a disabled track, Cubase in 14:15 crashes. All right, so instrument tracks, we don't see it listed here, so we can't necessarily change it when it's disabled. So when it's enabled, it shows up here, and then we could switch instruments like so. But when it's So let me know how, Anthony, how you are applying, if it's a MIDI track that's routed to a virtual instrument. So let me try that. So I'll add a track instrument here. Okay, so let's say backbone. Okay, so we're going to create a MIDI track. Okay, so we have a MIDI track, and let me disable this MIDI track. All right. And let me try to switch the instrument. So that seemed to work for me. So that MIDI track is now being routed out when it's disabled, but let me know if I'm doing it differently than you are. But it seemed to kind of work as expected for me. All right, let me just find my spot again. Okay, Jagannath says, want group track freeze, like how we freeze audio tracks filled with plugins. You know, when we're freezing an audio track, what we're doing is we're freezing the event, but there's no event to actually freeze. So when we come over, so if, let's go to a project and we'll set up a quick group track on drums. You know, so since there's actually no data on the track itself, there's nothing to freeze per se, but if you wanted to, you know, capture, so let's say I have all my drums going to a group. Okay, and let's say as we're playing this, so I want to take my drums and let's run it through like the Ultra Shaper. So let's say too much. All right, so if I want to come here, I could just say, so again, there's no data to freeze on a particular track, but if we wanted that to be rendered, we could say, okay, let's do our export audio mix down. Let's take our drum group and say, okay, we want to create an audio track from that. And let me just come here. Let me set my left and right locators. All right, so let's say we'll make it interlead file, create audio track. And there is our mix down file right there. So while it's not a freeze button, you could just simply have your drums automatically export it. So the group automatically rendered directly into the project. So it may not be freeze, but again, freeze is for a particular object that is selected because we're freezing the object. If there's no object to freeze, then we just render the file. So. All right, so FlyV says, where should I save the WaveLab full version? So, you know, WaveLab's going to be just a separate application. So if you save the, you know, it's just going to be probably, if you're purchasing it now, or it may just be the download of the installer. So you could save it to your downloads folder and then run the installer from that. And then that will install it into your computer. And then you could delete the particular like installation file if necessary, because you could always download it from the Steinberg download assistant. All right, Sarfim asks, is there any way to add reverb other than an insert on individual instruments? How can I add a reverb over multiple tracks to save resources? Okay, so let's take a look. So let's say I want to add reverb to all of my drums. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these drums, multiple tracks, and we could say let's add an effect track. So if we add an effects channel track, we could use sends. And if I want to add an effects channel to multiple tracks, I could come over here. Let me just mute our rendered file. All right, so now when we go to our, let's say our kick drum, I could just so I'll take my 3 kick tracks here. Okay. And then what we would, once we have an effect send, all we have to do is just come over, and as we work, we could blend in the amount. So let's say, okay, I want to take this kick drum. So it's one reverb. They're all being sent to the same reverb. So this way I can say, I want more reverb on that kick. And let's say on our sub kick, maybe I don't want any reverb. And so at this point, we could just come over and set. So once we add an effects channel, and we could do this independently as well. So let's say, okay, I want to take my guitars here. So I could say, okay, on my guitars, since we have an effects channel track that was added, so we could also just come over, let me add an effects channel track of a delay. So I'm going to add a track, let's add an effect channel. And this way, you know, multiple tracks could access that delay. We have one delay running instead of having a delay on every track as an insert. So let's come over here. Let's open up our studio delay. Okay, so now what I want to do is on the guitars, we're going to go to the sends. I want to go to the delay. So as we listen to this guitar part, and we'll solo the guitar. So let's say we'll make it a quarter note delay. So we're basically blending this track. So the more that we move this knob over to the right, more of the effect is blended in. So let's say I want to go to my snare track. So I'm going to select, let's say, my snare track here. And now I want to add that delay that we're also using on the guitar. effects send on. Now when the snare kind of kicks back in again. So guitar. So this way it's one effect, and when we add it as an effect channel, then all of the tracks we can send to that same effect in varying degrees. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see from FlyV says, I guess about saving the WaveLab. It says, should I save on my USB or my computer? So either place is probably just the download installation. So. All right, VS Terranova says, I'm with Cubase 15 Pro on Windows 10. When I try to load templates, UR22C, guitar vocal recording 1 and 2, I get the message, no valid licenses found. Morphing Channel Strip and Groove Agent Classics, GA Guitar Amp Classics. How do I get them? So if you have, make sure, one, that you have a UR22C interface. With the UR22C interface, you have a download sheet that has the access codes for the plugins, because you get plugins with those particular interfaces. The plugins, if you've had a UR22C for a while, for like the last year or so, like before the last maybe 15 months, the UR22C, the plugins were working under the e-licenser, and you could go to your My Steinberg account. If you have it on your e-licenser key, then if you go to your My Steinberg account, then the plugins, you'll have a voucher for taking the onboard plugins from the e-licenser to Steinberg licensing. So you make sure that you have it running under Steinberg licensing, but you only have those plugins if you have a UR22C. So if you don't have that interface and then you're opening up the particular template, it's referring to plugins that come with that interface. So if you don't own that interface, then you won't have access to those particular plugins. So it's part of the audio interface itself. All right. This is Mick Air. Says, thank you for answering my question. Song transitions question, Greg. How would you make little drum rolls and percussion rolls, like producer Cosmic Quest in Cubase? So I'm not familiar with the Cosmic Quest, unfortunately. I'm an old guy, sorry. But let's see if we still have that project open. All right, so we could do that for another month. But if we had to kind of do transitions between songs, so let's say, and I want to, so let's say if we're here, and then we could just kind of load in. So let's say if I come here, let's say we have a Groove Agent open. All right, so if I have like a Groove Agent track here, I could just play those particular parts. So let's say if I want to, let's put Cubase in Chord. You know, so you could just kind of sequence parts in between. If you wanted to do transitions between different songs to set that up, or if you wanted to do, you know, like, okay, we want to put in like another cymbal crash, you know, we could just... So you could just kind of, you know, program stuff as well, like accompaniment tracks, just to directly write along with it as kind of supplemental tracks for transitions. So we see Peter says, sorry, my bad, Greg, I meant the Zoom ID link and password. So if you want to email me on Monday or Tuesday morning, I usually, I'd be happy to kind of send... You know, so if you send an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could create the Zoom. I usually create the Zoom meeting maybe like an hour before we go on, before I start the live stream. But I'm happy to share that information with anyone, like the morning of. And I could create. I usually create. You know, I could create the Zoom meeting ID earlier so that you have that information beforehand. So I could give you the invitation if you want, to just reach out, like, you know, the morning of, and I'm happy to share that with anyone. All right, great to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Sven Isikson just says, when assembling songs, I suggest a better solution is to use 2 tracks and scissor between them. You can also use 1 track per song. This is useful for mastering, EQ, compression, etc. Yep, so some people, there's kind of different schools of thought with that. So a lot of mastering, like, you know, if you're in WaveLab, there's kind of, I'll show in, you know, so if you wanted to come over here and let's say we add another audio track, you know, we could just come over here. That way, like, processing kind of in more data. So a lot of people will do kind of transitions kind of like this, and if we're in WaveLab, we'll show you how you could do that. All right, so for here, I could just kind of right click, and then we could just choose to stagger clips across lanes. I know a lot of mastering engineers like that. I still kind of do it all kind of on one lane. And I think a lot of people had worked this way because maybe they didn't have the flexibility in WaveLab of being able to have, you know, your clip-based effects. So when you go to the inspector, you know, so maybe people that master in traditional DAWs with kind of a concept of, you know, tracks and a paradigm of mixing consoles, but in WaveLab we could have plugins that are on the track, plugins that are on the track, or plugins are on a clip, plugins are on a master output stage. So if this track needed to be a little brighter and I needed to have more compression on this, then we could do it as clip-based effects as well. But this is kind of how a lot of people will stagger tracks for like an album or CD release in mastering software. Thanks for mentioning that, Sven. All right, we see Matt Elston saying hi. All right, so Seraphim asks, is it better to use Windows 10 Pro or 11 Pro for Cubase? I hear many people saying Cubase runs better on Windows 10 with less crashes. Can you confirm? When I switched from Windows 10 to 11, I think they're both great operating systems. I haven't had a problem with either operating system with my personal computer. So I think, sometimes, if you're running a lot of older plugins, maybe, some stuff that hasn't been tested or the company went out of business. But I would say that, in general, kind of Windows operating systems running legacy, products designed for older operating systems is going to be probably better compatibility than on Mac OS. But I think either one works great. But maybe if, people have a preference that they share, that they want to share as well. Okay, so we see from D-Z or D's, I have a problem because I want my piano to play back my already recorded MIDI track so I could record the audio from my piano. Is there a way to do that? Okay. Okay, so I have a problem because I want my piano to play back my already recorded MIDI track so that I can record the audio from my piano. Is there a way to do that? All right, so let's say if we have, a piano part. All right, so say we have this piano, and this piano is going out to, I assume, maybe a real instrument, like an electronic keyboard, and you want to capture that piano as audio. So, if we have a MIDI track, this MIDI track, we send it out to the instrument. And the easiest way to do this is just to take the audio outputs of your electronic piano, connect it to audio inputs of your audio interface. So I'll pretend doing that since I don't have a real piano handy and wired up. So we're going to, the MIDI goes out to the piano, your electronic piano is generating the sounds, and then we just need to capture the sound. So you take the audio outputs from your electronic piano, instead of going into your speakers or your mixer, connect those directly to your audio inputs on your system and just record the audio. So in this case, I'm going to add an audio track. We'll make it a stereo track, and I'm going to connect it to, let's say, my rack instruments. So I'm going to add this track. So as we play, and we'll call this piano capture. So I have that track armed, and now as I record, and I will just, so as we play the MIDI is sent out to the electronic piano. The piano is generating the sounds. We're going to take the outputs of that, connect it to two inputs of your audio interface, add an audio track, set it to those inputs, and then just hit play. So you'll play the MIDI from the piano. You play the MIDI, sent to the piano, the audio is generated in the piano, and the audio is captured as an audio track in Cubase. So if we now want to just play this back, we could now listen to it. So, but if you don't have like an electronic piano, let me know. And if you give a little more information, it'd be great to have on my end. All right, so we see from George, great to see you on from Germany. It says, Greg, at times when I use my when I use a keyboard shortcut, I get disabled because of on-screen keyboard. I know Alt-K turns that off. But what triggers the online keyboard to come on? I never use it. And so, maybe if you accidentally, like instead of hitting Control-K, maybe you accidentally hit Alt or Option plus K, or if that is on. So, once this is on, we use the keys to actually play play as a virtual MIDI controller. So I'm using like QWERTY UI. But now if I go to access a key command, say, okay, I want to copy this, you may get kind of a message saying, so that will block a lot of key commands. So, generally it's going to be, maybe you accidentally hit a keyboard shortcut, or the keyboard shortcut is, maybe you have two keyboard shortcuts assigned to it, but it's, or if that keyboard is open, then, you have to close the keyboard for the key commands to pass. So we see Craig Noble says, hey Greg, when adding an effects plugin, I have a couple of plugins showing up twice in the list. Doesn't say VST2 or VST3. So generally, I don't have any VST2 plugins, but when we go to like a plugin list, you may notice that how you could differentiate a VST3 plugin. One is you could actually you'll see like 3 little dashes often, and it may not show up in mine because VST2 plugins don't work I'm running natively on Apple Silicon. But if you look over to the right, you may notice like 3 little diagonal slashes. And if it has 3 diagonal slashes, that indicates that is VST3. If it doesn't have the 3 slashes, that would indicate that it's like a VST2 plugin. All right. All right, Seraphim, is there any way to export audio from Cubase onto a program like OBS or Streamlabs? I would like to stream my Cubase session and have no idea how to stream the audio. Restream used to work before Cubase 13. So it could depend on your audio interface. Like my audio interface has like 3 separate drivers for the single interface. So one would be using for the DAW. If I wanted to send out the audio from my audio interface to OBS, I could just simply say, okay, we want to have OBS just simply, we could say, let's go to the streaming output. So this way the audio coming from my interface gets routed to my streaming output for OBS. And you could also narrate it with a voice. So this is one audio interface that kind of shows up as 3 different drivers. So that's how a lot of people will do that. There's also, Steinberg makes a program called MixKey. So, and this is a free, it's in public beta now, but works great. And what you could do is just kind of come over and you could go from your source pool and anything that's kind of passing audio. So if I have Cubase open, now if we have MixKey available as I play Cubase, we could now go to the settings to audio and say, okay, we want the stream output to go to MixKey. So we could take multiple sources, my Cubase, a web page, a microphone, a keyboard that has a USB audio driver. And now we could send all these sources directly into mix key, and then when we have mix key open, then we would set that as the input into OBS. So check out Mix Keys, a free utility. It was released about a month ago. All right. See, George says, I've had 2 crashes in Cubase 15 Pro so far, but was not asked to send a crash log on to Steinberg. Has that been changed in 15? So I think there may be, check your preferences. So if you get to your settings, I think it might be under general, but you could check the enable usage logging. But, there's a good chance that, even if not prompted, you could always submit it directly to, but check to see if this preference is enabled, because that may trigger the message for you. All right, great to see Tony Trunzo joining early morning from Australia. Steve Leeds is sending greetings from a sunny day in San the San Francisco Bay. Had a great time this weekend in San Francisco for a show. John Barry says, hi Greg, I want to send you a video. Do you have a file size limit? If so, would a link to Dropbox be okay? Yeah, so like Dropbox or WeTransfer or Google Drive, any sharing service would be fine. I'm not sure what our file size might be, 20 megabytes, but if you just send a link to Club Cubase at steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. Wonderful to see Sable Winters on from Bay Area, California. Everyone's happy that Sable's on. All right, so we see John Barry says OmniVocal can't perform live. It can make song lyrics with melodies for singers to perform. I think that makes more work for performers. That's a good point. All right, you see Tim Cage says, thanks for expanding that explanation of the AI vocal tool. All right, we see Keith Hirsch on. Says, hey Greg, nice to see and hear you. Hope you're doing well. All right, Raw Justice Hip Hop says, I can't sing and I don't know any singers. I use Synthesizer V and have no problem with AI vocals. All right, so we see from GMT, it says, hi, just a quick one. Using the extension of Spectral layers always takes a long time. Can I modify quality so it's quicker to separate stems? So yeah, it can be quicker to separate stems. And also if you have so let's say if I come here and let's get to our Spectral layers extension. If you're on Windows platform, also make sure that I think you could have Spectral layers set up to utilize the processing if you have a GPU. So if we come over, and you might have to turn that on, like it might be in the preferences. But I think that you could, have it set to do a lot of the processing on the GPU, and may not show up on my Mac OS. But if you're running Windows, I think you could check that. But if you adjust the quality lower, it will take less time. Or if you need something really quick, check out the stem separation that's included with Cubase. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. All right. See, Raw Justice Hip Hop says, I just wish Cubase had built-in versions of the third-party tools I'm using now. It would have saved me a lot of money. So, all right, so Tim K just says, I agree with Greg regarding third-party tools and instruments, and Steinberg have offered us amazing options. Arturia MIDI controllers include many plugins, so I have those too. See, Raw Justice Hip Hop just says, Cloudflare had an outage this morning. It's affected some of my third-party plugins in Cubase. All right. Tim K says, Cloudflare sounds like an accident at a refinery, just saying. All right, DaVinci Girl is just asking, there's a new promising breath controller on the market, DioSynth from ASM. Someone knows where is ASM placed? Where do they produce? China, USA, Taiwan, Japan? Yeah, I had a friend who had, I was helping out with their Cubase, and they got like a third-party breath controller. It just isn't working at all. So I'm not sure which one it is. All right, so we see Soren just says to Raw Justice Hip Hop, yes, Cubase with built-in plugins, especially those that had the outage for you. You know, Cubase adds plugins all times in new versions. Maybe it will happen. All right, John Barry asks, hi Greg, if I add an instrument by dragging its picture to the right zone, media VST instruments, I'll always add a D1 to the name. Is there a preference that could change to stop this? All right, let's take a look. Okay, so let's say we get an instrument track. So let's say drag this over. So it's just an O1 indicating, so let's say if I drag another Hallian Sonic over, it's just so that it's not the same track name. So I don't think that there is necessarily a preference for that, but it's just adding a unique name to it. If you wanted to use a project logical editor to get rid of numbers, you could do that if you want. So let's go to the project logical editor. And let's say, okay, I have these 3 tracks selected. So we'll say we'll transform let's say container type is going to be track, and we'll say that the property is set to is selected, and we say we want to adjust the name, we want to let's see if we can just say so you could do something like that, but I think it's, I think it's sensible for it to add, I don't think it's like D1, but I think it's going to be more, you know, for just to give each track a unique name when you're looking at it in the mixer or mixing down or doing batch exports. Okay, George asks, I have audio tracks sent to me that stretch over the whole length of a song. Say I want to take 2 measures and copy that to other places in the song. Which is the best way to do it? Okay. All right, so say I want to come here. All right, so say I want to take like this part here. Okay, so let's say I'm here, and I'll just loop this, and we'll. So let's say I want to copy that part to a different section of the song. So I would probably just use the range tool. So let's say, okay, I want to take this part here and hold down the Alt or Option key. And then, so you could just kind of take a range here, take that range, copy it here. So if we listen to this, it's my horrible edit. And then I have it pasted here as well. Going back to the original song. And then it'll go back to where I just copied that range. So just once you have the range selected, just hold down the Alt or Option key. Our original. So let me know if that's helpful for you. So you're going to take 2 measures, copy that to other places of the song. So I think probably the range tool is probably the easiest way. All right, so we see from George, and can you explain again the difference between event and part, audio and MIDI, and when to use which? So I would say events and parts, there's no delineation, no difference between audio and MIDI. But let's say I have this particular part here, I dragged down this range. Okay, and let's say I want to take this part here. So I'm going to take these events. All right, so events, when we see events on our project window and we zoom in on the events, we could say, okay, I want to do my fade in, fade out. I could adjust my clip gain on particular events. So if I say, okay, I just want to grab this portion right here. So this is all an event. So an event we could think of as a single entity. Now, if I have 3 separate events here, so let me just copy over some other ranges. All right, and I copy it to this part. Now let's say I glue these parts together. All right, so I'm going to take all 4 of these, and let's say, okay, now I'm going to glue the parts. Now, and when we glue we're going to glue the events. So each of these are events. They're kind of a single separate entity. Now, when I glue events together, they will transform into a part. Now, an event, when we double click, goes into our sample editor. So that's another differentiation. Now, when I double click on a part, now a part, we can consider it a collection of events. So now I can move one event without having to link or group those events together. Now, a lot of people realize that they've glued two events together, and I get this call all the time. It's like, yeah, my fade handles have disappeared, and I have no volume control for my clip gain. And that's because they are now within the editor themselves. So within the part editor. So think of a part as a collection of events. An event is kind of a single independent entity. So just a separate, unique part. But now if I wanted to come over here, let's duplicate this. So I'll make some copies. And we could also make what's called like a shared copy for this. So if I come over, so I could just, I'm going to hold down my shift key and make copies. So now if I come over here, let's say, okay, I double click to go into the part editor. We could have shared copies of this particular event. So I could say, okay, I want to get rid of this. So now when I get rid of the third event, that third event, I'll undo it, will be erased from the particular event. Or I want to move this. So if I move this in the part, the other parts can reflect that if it's a shared part. So a part is, you can think of it as a collection of events. And events are kind of, individual, independent entities. So let me know if that's helpful for you, George. All right, we see Cyclop from Finland. It says, been a while. It's great to have you on. All right, so we see from FlyV, just says, it's saying no valid license for WaveLab. Where do I find the license? So, WaveLab is going to be sold separately. It's not a free program. So if you have a WaveLab license when you purchase it, then at that point it will show up for you. So it's going to be sold separately. Okay, so you see from VS Terra Nova that it has a UR22C. So if you did install the programs with the USB e-licenser, look in, if you go to your My Steinberg account, look in your vouchers area if you had activated the licenses. So as soon as we come over here, log into your My Steinberg account. And look in your vouchers area, and you may see that you'll have the vouchers for those particular plugins if you installed them. All right, so we see FlyV asks, what is the DD Player 1.0 that comes with WaveLab? So DDP is a format often used in mastering for like an audio CD. We could think of it as like the data part of the audio CD. So it's a disk description protocol, if I remember correctly. And that's basically often what a mastering house, what you would send to, like, or not necessarily a mastering house, but maybe a duplication. So once a duplication facility, if you're making CDs, so the DDP is a way to kind of send a reference file to someone as data if you don't have, or if the, physically, delivering a CD across the world or across the country or across town isn't practical. You can just simply, instead of burning a CD, create a DDP, which is kind of like the actual data that's on the CD, and that DDP the DDP player utility allows you to open up the DDP image so that you could listen to it just as if you're listening to the CD. So it's kind of the data aspects, the data part of an audio CD, and that way you could share it with clients and producers, record companies, for them to listen to. All right, Alexander Plasko says, Win 11 Pro runs most of my old plugins through JBridge, even old 32-bit ones, Groove Agent 3, Virtual Bassist, Virtual Guitarist, Dakota, etc. No problems. I like to use what I paid for. It says sizing is the only issue on some. All right, Dr. McFarland Studios asks, great to see you on. Working with drums today, is there a way to see available options for drum fills in Groove Agent? All right, so if we have an acoustic agent, so let's go ahead and we'll open up like a kit that's with an acoustic agent. Okay, so here, I'll just open one that's freely available to everyone. So let's say we go to our studio kit here, and we want to go to Funky Rave. All right, so let's say we have, so I'm going to select the pattern here. All right, so we have, when we look at the pattern, so if we just hit the E button when Groove Agent is open, and we can go from the kit to the player. And when we see this, we have different colors. So the greens will be like introductions. So we have 2 introductions, and the reds are going to be endings. Now the yellow colored pads are going to be like pattern pads, and each of these pattern pads we could have different levels of complexity, so 16 levels of complexity, and we could also adjust our dynamics. So you could do the thing that all drummers hate, playing with intensity and a lot of complexity but very soft, or if you want to kind of go somewhere in the middle. Now I want it to be loud and simple, loud and complex, soft and simple, soft, complex. I want the happy medium. So we could do that. Now we also have fills. So I could trigger fills. And what's kind of cool about it is if we just have Groove Agent kind of playing, I could say we have an auto fill mode. So I could say, okay, every 4 bars, every 8 measures, just play one of the fills randomly. So we could just kind of come right over here. So now every 8 bars, it will randomly switch between those different fills. Now if I wanted to program what I could do is just come over here. So let's say, okay, I want to drag this over. So if I'm using kind of the built-in patterns here, I'll just say, okay, let's grab this pattern. Okay, and all right, so we want that right there. So I want to repeat that pattern. So let's hit Control Command D to duplicate, And let's say, okay, now I want like a fill. So I could drag that fill over. So say, okay, and maybe I want to have this automatically snap back. So we can say, okay, I'm going to turn my snap on, make this easier. So now as we do this, we could have that pattern repeated. This will be our fill. So you can just kind of drag and drop the patterns over as well. So now when we just say, okay, let's so that way you could just play the fills. So, you know, with acoustic agent kits, each one of the preset kits will have 4 fills. And if it's kind of a larger kit and you run it in the full groove agent, you can have up to 8 fills per pattern or per preset as well. All right, so we see Daniela has to go to sleep. She has to work early tomorrow. So thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question from Drazi Eternal. It says, hey, Greg, how are you? Kudos to Cubase 15. My question is there a way to change all MIDI channels to the same channel at once? Okay. Okay, so let me add a number of MIDI channels. Okay, so we look at this, we see MIDI channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so if we want all these to be on the same MIDI channel, I'm going to try just to hold down Option or Alt plus Shift. So let's come over here and let's change one of them to channel 1. So now all of the MIDI channels, if we look right here, as we select our different tracks, will automatically all be set to the same MIDI channel. So select, let's say the top and the bottom, hold down Alt or Option plus the Shift key and say, okay, I want these all to be set to channel 2. And now all of them are set to MIDI channel 2, as we see right here. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so Flyv just asked, what are the different parts included in the WaveLab Pro 12 startup screen? Let's take a look at it. Okay, so here I think that so we could see news, so you can see different tutorials, like what is a WaveLab project. We see kind of just a quick montage. What is a montage window? What is the audio editor? Let's look at batch processing. Here's where we could set our audio device. We could see projects, and projects can be in WaveLab, you have like an audio editor and an audio montage. We think of an audio editor as just dealing with one particular file, and the montage is a collection of audio files that could be like for an audio CD. And then so you could switch back and forth, and you have also a batch processor, and that would allow you to do stuff like, okay, I have 10,000 audio files in 48K, and I need to take all these files and convert them to 44.1K, and I don't want to do it one at a time. I could say, let's take every folder, every file in this particular folder, do a sample rate conversion, do a dithering, and then put it into this folder on the output. So that's what batch processing does. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Vince. All right. All right, great to see Steve Green checking in from Manchester, UK. All right, so you see from C. McD says Cubase 15, is there a shortcut to transpose a keyboard one octave as you play, not using MIDI modifier transpose? I mean, you could use, there isn't a keyboard shortcut. I mean, if you're doing it all the time, you could set up an input transformer. So if you want to just come over here and set up, if you get to the project menu, you could have the project input transformer. And here we could say we want to transform MIDI notes. And I'll remove this, and we want to take the MIDI notes, and we're going to take our subtype and add 12. All right, so if I have that set up in the project logical editor, all you would have to do, I don't think that there's a keyboard shortcut to enable the project input transformer, but let me see. Yeah, so we can't turn it on with the keyboard shortcut, but you could just simply click right here, and if you have that set up as your project input transformer, you could do that. Often the simplest way is just most controllers that I know of can automatically just have an octave transpose function, and then Cubase will accept any what MIDI notes are being actually transmitted from the MIDI controller, so that you can have transposition. So, but I don't know of a way to do it without the input transformer or the MIDI modifiers, which you can't do with keyboard shortcuts. But you know, see if you have an octave transpose button on your controller. All right, we have JB sending greetings from Raleigh, North Carolina. All right, we see Alexander Plasko says he used to have a Flying V. All right, Keith Hirsch just says doing great. Thanks, Greg. So missing you at Yamaha. All right. Massimo asks, hi Greg from Bologna. Cubase 15 Pro, do you have any suggestions for setting up Arturia Keylab Essential to use the chord pads? Chords often end abruptly. Thanks. All right, so let's say I'm going to just come over here. Let's add an instrument track. Let's do. All right, so I'm going to go to chord pads here. So I'm just playing. So as soon as I release the key, it seems like it's sounding triggering a B flat chord until I release. Still going. So this is me just, if you're playing from the chord pads, it says chords often end abruptly. So I'm just holding that chord down. So I'm not sure if maybe it's the patch that you're using, but this is just like amped Electra, so like a kind of a Hohner Electra piano. But let me know if you see that on all patches or it's just one particular patch that you run into that. All right, always wonderful to see Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. Great to see you on, buddy. All right, so we see Flyv. Could you show me how to mix picks with audio into a video file outcome in WaveLab? So I'm not sure if it's going to generate kind of like a video. We can have a video file in WaveLab and we could export the audio to the video file, but I don't think it's going to, create like, generate its own imagery and stuff like that. So I think the video aspect in WaveLab is really intended to, okay, I need to edit and repair or fix the audio on a video file so I could extract it in WaveLab, do all of its editing, clean stuff up, and all sorts of great editing functionality, and then export that back. But I don't think it's intended to make like a video that plays back with just the actual like a picture of the video. So I'm sure there's lots of programs that do that, but it's WaveLab's going to be more of like an audio editor mastering solution. But when we add the pictures in WaveLab, that's going to be like the image that you would see like when you're listening to it in Spotify and what you see on your phone, as opposed to like a video that's played on YouTube. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset, UK. All right, so we see Asterisk Studio. How can I record MIDI program change over USB MIDI in Cubase track? I don't think I have anything that's set up to transmit a program change, but it's just MIDI data that's going to show up as a MIDI system common message. So I'll do a quick input transformer here on the track. And I don't have any keyboards that are connected in my work computer. They're doing program changes, but I'll just kind of I'll convert mod wheel into program change. Okay, so when we come over here, so now when I record on this MIDI track, I'm going to move my modulation wheel. My mod wheel is set up just to take modulation data and convert it to program changes. All right, so let's see if I... right, so say I record pitch bend. Okay, so now when I go to my, so the program change that's recorded, you may think that's going to show up here in the program and bank change. So those are just kind of manually entered. But if you had recorded it, it would just simply show up directly here. So you would just see it in the program change area. So let's just come over. So here is my MIDI program change data. So if we look at it, let's say in the list editor, we can see that our program change is just going to be recorded. So when you, like if you're, in record and you switch and you hit a button to go to this particular sound on your keyboard, when you hit the button, it's often sending a program change, and then that would be just recorded. If you're switching banks at the same time, the bank change may be recorded independently, but it's going to show up in the MIDI event itself, and it's not going to show up in the program change and bank change message in the inspector. So it's really just hitting record and capturing the program change or bank change message, and then it shows up as MIDI data in the event. All right, with Michael Team's late entrance, he's now started by giving Jazz Dude 1 gallon of fresh Texas strawberry ice cream. All right, Gerald Ely, great to see you on. Just saying good morning to everyone. I think it's 11:26 his time, so maybe he's retired and enjoying sleeping in. But great to have you on, Gerald. All right, Rashab Saxena, how can I set a key modifier for the erase tool similar to how holding Alt temporarily switches to pen tool in the key editor? So that would be super helpful. So I'm not sure if you want, so like when we come, so I'm not sure if it's in an editor, because obviously we have just the erase tool, or you just hit the delete key. So, usually when we're selecting something, we have like the alter option. We have the ability to, to select, but there isn't a modifier. I mean, I think most people just hit backspace or delete, or just simply switch to the erase tool. If you're in a MIDI editor, what you could do is, let's say we have this, if it's within the MIDI editor, a lot of people just compose with the mouse, so you could just double click and add notes, or double click to erase notes. But that behavior is a little different than double clicking to get into the editors. Let me know if you want it for the, and we could use like Alt plus Shift to navigate within the editor, or the Alt to split, like that. So let me know if it's in the editor or within the project window, but I don't know of a current one that will do that. So Sven Isaacson says, weird, the YouTube stream on my computer is lagging 1 minute and 25 seconds behind the stream on my Apple TV at the moment. Yeah, you often notice it, like, if you, like sometimes if I listen to the same channel on a streaming service or on satellite radio, the timing can be off. And I think it's often, different services, may throw ads in at different points as well. I don't think we have ads during ours, but it could be different. Jazz Dude's giving thanks to Michael Teams for that virtual ice cream. Sable has received 1 gallon of coconut almond fudge ice cream. All right, so we see from George says, thanks, Greg. When I used a range tool to copy, do the copies show changes that I make in the original file, or would I need to do something else that changes are happening in the copies? So if you're doing kind of a shared copy, so let me just grab. All right, so let's say we just have our audio file here, and I'll do just maybe like a reverse. So let's say I want to do fade in on this. All right, so we could see that section. So if I convert, if I go to audio, if it's an audio event, you know, we could say, all right, let me. All right, so I'm going to split here. And then we will do, so I'm going to split that so it's a separate event. Let's do just a quick fade in. All right, so we can see that this event is going to fade in. All right, so now if I come over here, we could say I want to do event to part. And now if I want to copy this, I'm going to hold down Alt, and I think maybe Shift. So Alt or Option plus Shift, and that will make a shared copy. And we can see a shared copy because it has like two horizontal lines, like an equal sign. So I'm going to copy that. So I'm going to select, hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. So now when I make a change in this particular file, so let's say I want to do a fade out, we can see that when I do a fade out in the part editor, that fade out is automatically applied to all the other parts. So if I now want to come here, let's make it really quiet or loud, then I make an edit on one part, those parts will automatically reflect. So what you want to do again is to split, select the range, hit Shift plus X to split the range, take that range, convert it to a part. So go audio menu, events to part, and then when you make your copies, drag it, hold down your Alt or Option plus Shift key. And now when you make a change to one of the events, they will all change correspondingly. Let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see Sue ask, with step note entry between MIDI and score editor and quantize length, quantize preset, I'm trying to sync so that, for example, when I play at 150 BPM, the notes don't stack up in a jumbled mess. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say I go to my step entry, and let's say my quantize is set to quarter note. All right, so we'll start here at measure 16. So now when I put in a Okay, now let's undo that and let's see if we do the same step entry. So we'll start at 16 again, but we'll go into the score editor. Because that's going to be just kind of set on the quantized value since that didn't change. And the keyboard shortcuts, it's, usually to set insert length is going to be more for when we want to manually kind of place our notes in. But if we're doing step entry, the step entry is going to be based on the quantized position. So let me know if that's helpful for you. I'll just reread it again from Sue. All right, so you see a question, or maybe just a follow-up question before we move on. It says, Sue says, I used a quantized link function in the MIDI editor, but can you explain how this works in sync with the score editor? So yeah, so let's say if I'm here and now I want to do eighth notes. So when we do our step entry, and let's just kind of say, okay, this is where kind of our playhead is. All right, so let me just switch to this tool. All right, so now I'm going to put in, so we have, let's say, our step entry. As we come over here, I just use my arrow keys. And let's switch this to eighths and see. So it could be, the one thing that could be tripping you up with this is, once you have the pencil tool selected, then it's going to go kind of based on this. But if you're doing, when we're entering notes in, but if you go to the selection tool instead, then with step entry, it's going to use the quantized value. And that way you could toggle back and forth between the key editor and the score editor and have the same quantized value. All right, GMT asks, does Cubase 15 include any built-in monitor or headphone EQ plugin to compensate for my headphones when mixing? Or do you need a third-party solution like SonarWorks? So there currently isn't any headphone kind of match plugin. There is one inside of Nuendo, but it's not available in Cubase. So we see John Barry says, hi Greg, is a DDP player producing something like an orange or red book standard file? So we could think of it, I believe it's going to be the red book file, kind of the data of the red book file CD, but it won't generate a red book CD. The burning is still going to be handled inside of WaveLab. So I don't think that the DDP player will play or author, or it'll play the, you could generate a DDP image of like from within WaveLab. So I'll just show you here real quick, open up WaveLab, but I don't think it's going to write a Redbook standard, but what you have as compliant for your Redbook standard. So we'll come over here. Let's say we go to our album wizard. And so let's say we want to do our album wizard here. So I'll say, okay, we'll apply. And now when we go to burn, here we see there's no CD drive. So now it's going to generate a DDP image. And then that is what you would load into the DDP player. So it's basically the Red Book CD standard. I don't think it deals with Orange Book. I think it's just a Red Book, so that you could kind of use it for quality control purposes. All right. Okay, so next question. Just says, hi Greg, when you hover a mouse over a fader or a number, you can use the mouse wheel to raise or lower the value. Is there a way to set it so that the value changes in whole increments, like 1 dB or 0.5 dB? All right, so let's take a look. So let's say we're at minus 5.79. All right, let me have to adjust my preference here. Here, let me just. All right, so I'm not sure if, I'm trying to remember where the preference was. Let me just take another quick. Don't think it's in here, but. Okay, so we see mouse wheel for changing parameters on the mouse wheel. So I'm going to enable that. All right, so we're, let's say, at minus 6. All right, but I think if we there might be like a keyboard shortcut to do this, but maybe not with the mouse wheel. Let me just. Okay, so let's try this, the primary. So Command plus Shift up. All right, so let's say right now we'll be at minus 12. All right, so I'm going to hit Control or Command plus Shift. And then I can move it 1 dB up with the keyboard shortcut. And so that's going to be, so right now we're at minus 10. So if I hold Command or Control plus the Shift and the up arrow, we can navigate we can move the fader with 1 dB intervals. And then there's also, we could do the fine control. And let's see. So right now we are at minus 6. and this will do, looks like 1/10 of a dB with fine control. So I can move it in 1 dB intervals with keyboard shortcuts, or if I want to move it in fine, I can move it 1/10 of a dB up and down as well. So just come over to the key commands, and you will see primary, and this will be under, I think, edit, and then you'll see primary parameter increase, decrease, and then fine controls as well. So it's not with the mouse to make it go equal, but you can do it with keyboard shortcuts. All right. See, Drowsy Eternal says, cool, thanks for the MIDI channel answer. Very helpful. Carry on. All right. Ian Nichols asks, also, is there a hotkey to add a node at the automation lane at the cursor, or 2 nodes to the left and right locators? All right. So let's say if I'm here, so if I just use like the range selection tool, and we adjust like up or down, you know, we could add nodes there. Don't think that there's a key command to insert the node at. I'll take a look, but I don't know of one. Yeah, I don't know of a way to do that. I could do some more research on it for Friday's live stream. All right, so we see Sue says that he solved the secondary screen problem by setting up a window layout. All right, so we see Val joining, just saying what's going on with his dearest Cubase users. See, FlyV says, thanks for the knowledge, Greg. I can never get enough. I'll be doing lots of research on the program. All right, so we see Michael Teams is granted Brian Sawyer Sr. 1 gallon of mint chocolate chip ice cream. All right, John Barry says, hi, Greg. If we may be getting a Groove Agent 6 soon, I would like to way to filter pitch bend at pad level. I would like to use pitch bend only on the toms to bend the tom decay without bending all the sounds. Let's see if it does. Let's do a new project, and I'll just test it, see if we entered in by MIDI. And if we do kind of note expression stuff. try it with Groove Agent 6 SE since it's a later version. Okay, so let me just program a quick beat here. Alright, so let's say we want to do Alright, so let me just Alright, so let's come and I'm just going to duplicate this pattern here quickly. Alright, so I'm going to see what happens if we just let's come over to note expression and we'll just say, okay, let's select tuning. Okay, I'm sorry, I had the wrong icon checked. Okay, let's see if the toms change pitch here. All right, so It looks like they already do respond to like the MPE data. So say if I come here, we get out of one shot. Let me turn my snap off, sorry. So here we see that we're doing pitch bend just on the tom sound without affecting. So it can respond to it already, but it could be that, filtering out MIDI because MIDI pitch bend would be a MIDI system comment message that's going to all, but if you needed to program it, you could do it through note expression, change the pitch, so you could do that already. So if you need to program it with pitch bend independently, you can do it, but it may not be driven by your pitch bend wheel. You could maybe set up to do, if your controller does polyphonic aftertouch, you could set that up, but the pitch bend would go for all notes on a channel. It's just the nature of MIDI pitch bend controls. But if you wanted to have independent pitch, you can do it already. Wonderful to see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford, England. All right, so we see Val just says the Cubase Livestream doesn't have ads, which is just great and the right thing to do. So I think the ad would be a great way to lose people all the time, especially on a live stream and watching it. So yeah, I give credit to Steinberg for not monetizing the YouTube channel. I probably could have retired a couple years ago with all the money if they monetized it. All right. All right, so we see Sable is look for feedback on a Warm Audio WA47 or Avantone CV12 for vocals. And she's going to be purchasing this week. So we see from Val, it says, so far I love Cubase 15. I played around a lot with the Omni vocals. How is the copyright situation on that? Did we already talk about that? So I think it's not, I think that the license doesn't intend it for live performance. I kind of sent an email. I'm kind of inquiring as to what the details. So I think you could use it in songs, but maybe not for like a live performance. Sable is, Sven Isaacson is recommending the 47 for, as he's an old Beatles fan, as a microphone. All right, so we see Thermonuclear says I've been a long time out of the stream, so good to see you back. See Michael Team's helping with Sable's mic inquiries. All right, Val in Vienna is just asking, is Y42, can Nuendo open Cubase projects? Yes, and Cubase can open Nuendo projects. Nuendo can open Cubase projects. So. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on. Checking in from Spain. All right, Jess Askins says, saw the live stream in progress and thought I'd join. Cubase 15 Pro, WaveLab, Halion, and Groove Agent user. Thanks for joining us. All right, Sue's just asking, is a Quantize link in the MIDI editor linked to the score editor? All right, so let's come over here. Okay, I'll just add instrument track. We'll do this as MIDI. All right, so let's set my Quantize link here. So I think the Quantize link is global. So let's say if I set my Quantize link here to quarter note triplets, that it's set on the project window. And if we go into the score editor, we still see the quarter note triplets. So the Quantize values are kind of consistent throughout the program. So again, if we go to our drum editor, we got quarter note triplet. If we go to our score editor, the Quantize is set to quarter note triplet. And if I change it here, let's say to eighth notes, now we see it reflected in both the project window to score editor, to the drum editor, to the key editor. Okay, so we see from Green Ray, can I hide the locate bar? So I'm not sure if it's like if it's on the top here. If you wanted to right click, you could just choose to say, okay, we have our locators here. So we could right click and hide or show the locators. So as soon as we come right over here, and if it's on the project, if it's on the transport, again, we could right click and see the locators or locator range can be hidden. So just kind of right click in a blank area, and then you could see the setup window for all the different functions. All right, Sven's asking, isn't the Phones Match plugin Innuendo a bit misplaced? I'm convinced that a Cubase Elements user is far more likely to mix on headphones than a Innuendo user. Yeah, but it's more critical when we're doing, I think it's more critical as we're monitoring binaurally for like a Dolby Atmos. And that's kind of the intention of the headphone match, is not only for EQs, but also to make sure that, that the different settings are optimized for binaural monitoring, and I don't think that that is really like a Cubase element user. Right, Captain Cricket 3D asks, hey Greg, what's the best way to uninstall Cubase 14 on Mac after installing Cubase 15? It's really just kind of going to your applications menu and just coming over here. So let's say we go to Finder, to applications, and then just removing it. There could still be remnants of it left in preferences and application support. Unfortunately, Mac OS doesn't really support an uninstaller, so kind of limited in stuff, but most of the time people would just take the Cubase 14 icon from the applications menu and just put it in the trash. It's kind of the common uninstallation method for Mac OS. Okay, so we see from Hoy Boy, just says, "Hi Greg, greetings from LA. Is there a way to import custom quantized grooves from Cubase 14 to 15? Profile Manager didn't work with this." Okay, so let's see. All right, so I'm going to open this up and okay, so let's say this is our preset here. Okay, I'm just going to give it all right, so let's call this Hoy Boy. Okay, so let's just look, see if it's in your preferences or your application data support, depending on your operating system. So it might be in part of like the default XML file. Okay, so it might be, and I could do some more research on this for Friday's live stream, but I think if we go over here to, sometimes it's going to be in like the default XML file. But let's just take a quick look. So let's come over here. So it could be in here. So I think it's going to be maybe in the RAM presets. So maybe if you copy the RAM presets from Cubase 14 to, from Cubase 14 to Cubase 15, that you could get that preset back, or if it's a number of presets, you could also just take MIDI, take a bunch of MIDI parts and use the Quantize presets in 14 and drag and drop them into 15 as well. All right, so Gareth just says, thanks for the marvelous bass line. So after tomorrow at like 6:30 my time, I should be just have a load of work off. So I'm hoping to get some more, and next week should be light, so I can get some other ones done. But I have a couple questions. I'll email you, Gareth, but glad you got those. All right. All right, so you see just some discussion about the headphone match, and he just asking, says, I think everybody gets that. It's just that users of entry level Cubase would be the ones most likely to want that feature, or college kids in their dorm rooms, for example. So I think, for users of that, I think any headphones that goes directly, into their interface was probably good enough for, would meet their expectations. All right, so we see from Flyv, just says I have no album wizard. My WaveLab, where can I find it or set it? Okay. Okay, so there's like two different modes. Let's say we want to go to like an audio montage. All right, we'll do, let's say, CD standard. I'll create. So once we're in a montage, then you see the album mode. So if we are, so let's say if I want to insert audio files. Okay, so let's say we have some audio files here. So if we go to the typical editor, so let's say we do a new audio file. We don't see the album wizard here, but when we do a new montage, so we say new audio montage, and we create, then once we're here, then you'll see the album wizard. So think of it as like two different modes. So like you can edit the individual file or put individual files together to make the CD, and that's done in a montage. So once you're in a montage, then you should see the album wizard at the top there. All right, so we see from just asking, says Greg, that doesn't make a lot of sense. What's to prevent somebody from bouncing an Omni vocal down and exporting a WAV file for playback during a live performance? It feels an unnecessary step. Yeah, so I haven't gotten all the details on the licensing, and I'm not sure like what, and it's done by Yamaha in Japan, so I could see if I could get some clarification on it. But obviously, you could render stuff down. But that is the license agreement from what I've read. All right, Bratman Studio just says, hey Greg, what's your MacBook configuration currently? So I have a M4 Max with 64 gigs of RAM and a 2 terabyte drive. So this is my setup. All right, so Graham Witcher just says, ideally one should listen to as many speakers as possible to get the mix perfect, whether it's small or large monitors, hi-fi, or even set up in your car. Don't rely on one source. And Jess Askin says, I used to drive around town testing my own and other people's mixes in his BMW. He says, that was fun. All right. All right, the real Winslet fan says my Cubase install has gone bonkers. It's sending CC7 and other weird things to plugins anytime the transport is started. So are you actually running the transport from a controller, or are you running the transport from clicking the buttons, or are you running the transport from like a keyboard? So I would say if you're doing it from a controller, make sure that when you get to your studio setup, and let's say if you have like a Mackie control device, so if you're using a controller here, you probably want to go to your MIDI port setup and make sure that you have a little option here for in all MIDI inputs. Make sure that your control surfaces aren't being sent from in all MIDI control surfaces. So sometimes if you have a control surface, when you hit start, what that's actually sending is a MIDI note message. That MIDI note message is interpreted by the program as a start, but if it's also set to all MIDI inputs, it may also send MIDI CCs or MIDI note messages. So let us know if you have a controller and see if you disconnect the controller, does it go away? And if so, you probably just need to go to your controller. And for the control parts, make sure that in all MIDI inputs is unchecked. So we see from Sue, says, what's your opinion about using Touch OSC for automation capabilities where you can program faders, for example? I know lots of composers use it for setting up, kind of like a master control template, and that could include controllers. I tend to use, the one control surface. I have my CC121, which is a single fader. So if I'm like writing automation for vocals or parts, at that point I could just use one fader at a time. And if I need more faders, I often just use my Korg Nano control. I don't like control surfaces that I have to buy a new desk for. So, I see that where it's like, cool, I got a $400 control surface. Now I have to redo my desk and buy a new desk to fit the control surface, and a desk is going to cost me 3 times more than the control surface. And, so I'd like to have things kind of within reach. So small controllers I personally like. But a lot of people use the Touch OSC. You have to, put put the hours in and get it configured for exactly what you want to do. And if you want to trigger other functions, I also use a stream deck for not necessarily MIDI CC messages, but for, accessing a lot of, parts of the program that are under the hood. And to, trigger functions that you don't have to memorize keyboard shortcuts to. Okay. Okay, so we see from Sue just saying the length quantize function is different from the quantize, and it has a quantize link function. I can't figure out what it links to quantize values are when in a score editor, for example. Thanks always. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so I'm going to put in some half notes here. All right, so let me just... Okay, so let's say we have some notes here. Okay, so let's say I will randomly move some of these notes around here. Okay, so let's say, and I'm going to adjust the length on these. Okay, so when we do a traditional quantize, I'm going to select all the notes. I'm going to say we want to quantize to, let's say, to half note. So now when I quantize, it's going to move the events to the nearest half note. All right, so now we can see that the lengths of the notes aren't set. While the note is starting on a half note, the note may not necessarily be ending on the half note. So this one is hanging over, this one is. So now when we go to edit, we can say, let's go to our advanced quantize, and we can say, let's quantize the event lengths. So now we look at the ends of the notes, and the ends of the notes have been quantized. So I could also just come here and say, I want to not quantize the start of the notes, but I want to quantize the length of the notes. So when we go here to advanced quantize, you can say, let's quantize the event lengths, but they're still starting at different points, but the lengths are now all quantized to half notes. And then if I hit the regular quantize, then the start of the note. So we could quantize the end of the note, the length of the note, and the start position of the note. And when we do the link, what that's going to do is to link the start and end of the note to the quantized value. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Sue. And let me know, I know your name's not Sue, let me know if you want me to call you by your name, or if Sue is fine. So didn't mean to be disrespectful or anything. So. Okay. All right, so we see a question from Eric Fox. It says, Greg, please tell Steinberg to make it possible saving user samples from Drum Machine with the project folder, please. I think it does it already. Let me just check. So let's open up a new instance of Drum Machine. Okay, so we're going to add a drum track. I'm going to come over here. So we have our drum track open. Let me go to some samples. So I'm going to take these 8 snares. And we've now... Okay, so let's look at... I'm going to undo that. Let's look at our pool. I'll just do this at a brand new project so we can keep our pool clean. Okay, and I'm just going to do this where I'm put the project on our desktop. So, or let's just do this one more time so we could be aware of the path. So let's say, okay, let's put it on desktop. We'll do new folder. Okay. So now we add drum track. Let's go to drop some of my own samples in. Okay, so now we have, now let's look at the pool window. So we'll go here to media to open our pool window. We look at the audio files that are going to be in the plugins that are in the Steinberg Media Technologies Drum Machine. All right. And let's check their path. Okay, so this is the path currently we can see is going to be not in the folder that we set. Okay, so I think if we just come over now and say, let's right click and say prepare archive. It says external files will be copied into the working directory. So we say proceed, pool is ready for archive. And now all of the files are now going to be in the user's desktop, drum machine samples, audio. So now those particular projects are actually just in that folder. So let's look at the folder. So we'll go to our Finder window here. And all the audio is now copied into that project folder. So once you drag those in, just go into the pool and just choose Prepare Archive. So I told Steinberg about it and they fixed it for us. So now you can have that feature free, and I think it works the same in 14 or 15. So enjoy the new feature, Eric. Let me know if that helps. All right, so we see Baza just saying hi all from London. All right, so Bratman Studio says, hey Greg, on Mac, is there a big difference between 48 gig and 64 gig on an M4 chip? What you think? That speed, will it make that much difference with Cubase 15? You know, I had a discussion yesterday with a colleague, and I think having the additional RAM, you know, because you can't undo that decision on newer model Macs, I would always err in the suggestion of getting more RAM. And to me, it's not that, you know, and I know it's like ridiculously expensive. You know, you look at like RAM prices on Black Friday and it's like, you know, why is it 10 times more on this computer versus another one? but you can't upgrade it later. But what I think the important thing is that it actually gives you kind of, you know, better longevity. So it may give you an extra year or two of using that particular computer. So you know, if you could swing to 48, you know, if you have to do to 48, that's okay. But yeah, if you could swing to 64, I would like err on the side of that. All right. All right, just have a bunch of messages coming in. All right. You see John Barry says, hi Greg, noticed earlier you had what looked like duplicates in the MIDI remote manager. I found it since recent updates. Once I've deleted them, they do not return. Yeah, I saw that too. I just haven't had a chance to go through it with my controllers hooked up. But I'll try that. But thanks for letting me know, John. All right, Kenneth Gilmore says, is Groove Agent 6 a must for Cubase 15, or can we use previous versions of Groove Agent like Groove Agent 5 or something? It's not a must. It's the latest version. So if you don't install Groove Agent 6 SE, your Groove Agent 5 will still continue to work and function as expected. Okay, Dejan Teklit says, I just bought MPK for MIDI. Do I need to register and download the software of the Akai, or just it will work with Cubase 12? If yes, could you show us to configure or map the MIDI? So I'm not sure if you need to install. My impression is that it should, you know, the drivers will probably be recognized. You know, without having to install. You may not be able to install like free plugins or plugins, and you know, that you're entitled to with the purchase of the hardware. That would probably be something you'd have to register for to get. But if you want to get it set up as a MIDI remote, you know, what you could do is just kind of, you know, come right over, you know, you'll see the MIDI remote area, and like as you know, come over to, you know, different areas, you could, you know, just simply click on the plus sign, and as we start, and then you could just, you know, basically build your own, like, you know, MIDI remote map. So, and there are scripts that are available for Akai. So I'm not sure if, but a lot of companies will have scripts that are already done. So you can see that Akai has already made different scripts that are available, and then it should be fairly plug and play for that. All right, Brian Sawyer wants everyone to smash the like button, or mash the like button. All right, so we see from Steven says, hi Greg, if you know that, is there a way to show two complete staves above middle C, not just reference lines above one stave in score editor. All right, so let me just take a look. So let's say we go. All right, so you want to do maybe a split point, two complete staves above middle C, not just one reference lines above one stave. Let me just see if. So I'm not sure if you want two complete lines here. So let's say if we're in our score editor, you know, if you want it like two treble clef staves. So let's go to the instrument. Yeah, so I'm not sure, like, if you want like two treble clef staves, let me know if it's for a single part. So I'm not sure if I know how to do that. I know we could have kind of the grand staff, which is obviously more typical. But yeah, I'm not sure I know a way to make two treble clef. So I'm not sure if you want like middle C here and then like a treble clef and then like another treble clef on top. So like if you want this, let's say we have like that would be like maybe an octave. Like if you wanted something like that. So let me know if that's so, and that's just by selecting the staves and the clefs and being able to adjust those. So we could also, so let me know if that's, you know, if you want it to be, you know, up 2 octaves on this. So if that's what you want to do, you could just go to the clefs and maybe change it like that. All right, so we have Roland Stuff. Great to see you on. Says, hi, Greg, joining from Sussex in England. And therefore, probably too late to ask any questions this time, but I just wanted to say hi to you and all the Cubasers on today's live stream. Hopefully, if you get your question, we can get to it. We still have about 20 minutes or so before I need to wrap up to do my other webinar. Charles Parente says, hi, Greg, can you show some of the commands that you use your Stream Deck for? I have it upstairs in another office. So I don't have it right now, but I could have it kind of set up for Friday's live stream if you want to check back. Okay, see Gareth has to take off. Gareth says Ultra Shaper equals great. Yeah, I saw someone, might have been on a live stream, might have been Val, said they're going to get an Ultra Shaper tattoo. Let's see, Raw Justice Hip Hop just says he has a MPK Mini and works great with Cubase. Okay, Tomek asks, when I teach a plugin directly via last touched control without quick controls, just teaching it the mapping only works in the first insert slot where I originally created it. Okay, so, all right, so let's take a look. So I think if we do like the focus quick control, so let's come over, take a look at it. Okay, so let's add a couple audio tracks. And let's say we have Black Valve in this track, and we have this track Ultra Shaper. Okay, so let's say I want to control this parameter here. All right, so we get an Ultra Shaper. I'm going to right click and we'll say MIDI control, and I move the knob and we've applied that. So now when I adjust that, and when I come over to Audio 01, I want to take my second knob and control the peak reduction. So I'm going to right click and we'll say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. Okay, so we apply that. All right, so now when I have both plugins open, and we can see that this is going to be, you know, when we assign it this way, whatever particular track we want to work with, you know, so if I come over here and I have this track selected, that parameter is kind of fixed to that insert slot on that track. And if I open up this one, let's say the we'll open the Black Valve. So now whatever track is selected, these are kind of hard mapped to their locations. So if I have this track selected, I move the second encoder, that's always going to go to that parameter on that insert slot. Now if we always want that particular parameter to go, you know, to when I have this plugin selected, I want like these parameters to always be mapped, you know, regardless of where the actual plugin is instantiated. That's when we would do the quick control settings. So I would come over and let's make, I'll just switch this to do like a focus quick control. So we go to our focus quick control here. I say, okay, this is going to be quick control 1. Apply mapping, quick control 2, apply mapping. I move the third knob, quick control 3. So, and what we could do now is when I select a plugin, and that plugin is the active window, now, since this is active, these plugins, these controls will control these parameters directly there. So I go to this plugin, this is the active window, and now we're controlling the parameters of this plugin. And if I open up a new track, and we say let's add the track, and I'm going to put it on insert. Let's come over here to Ultra Shaper. So we'll say, okay, now that this is the active plugin, my remote control is automatically controlling those parameters regardless of slot. So when you right click, that's assigning that particular plugin parameter in that particular slot so that your active selection will always be maintained. If you want to be able to move it, use the focus quick controls. And if you don't like the parameters that are assigned in your focus quick controls, you can click right here on top of the plugin and learn and modify the settings so every time you go to a particular plugin, that those particular settings are recalled and set for you. Okay, see Gerald Ely has take off. Okay, just reading through a couple comments on this. All right, Rishab Saxena says, I use multiple parallel chains for my sound, but I hate sending to each one separately. Is there any routing trick that lets me send to just one and still hear all of them? All right, let's take a quick look. All right, so let's say we have this going on. All right, so I want to send this. Let's say I have groups that are parallel. So I'm going to add, let's say, 3 groups. All right, so let's say I'll add another group here. All right, so let's say group 1. If we come over here, let's go to our direct routing. So let's say group 1 is going to go to or we can just do sends here to group 2, group 3, group 4. All right, so let's say like groups 2, 3, and 4 are my parallel. All right, so if I send this track out to group 1 and then turn it on, we can now see that this track is being sent to group 1. Group 1 is being propagated to groups 2, 3, and 4. So if you have those, so you could use an intermediary group if you wanted to. So. All right, let me jump to a couple questions that were mailed in. We have to wrap up in about 10 minutes because I have another webinar to do at top of the hour. All right, so we had a question, how to get MIDI notes to snap to the scale from the chord track. Okay, so let's come over and let's say, so I'll come here quickly. Okay, so I have a chord track. I want to drag this track up. We'll say okay. So right now we have our chord track, and we can see that our scale from the chord track has been determined as G major. All right, so when we go into our scale assistant here, so we're going to double click, go into the editor. We'll see your scale assistant. We want to use the scale from the chord track. And we could say, okay, we want to use just the chords or chords and scales. And then we could do snap pitch editing. So as soon as I come over here, if I want to draw a note in, now since I'm using the chord track with the scale editing, I have snap pitch editing. I can only move it to notes within the chord. If I want to move it to notes within the scales, I could now, as I move the note, or if we didn't want to have, the scale correction, we could just simply turn that off. So again, once we have the scale set here, what we could do is just go to our scale assistant, and we could say utilize the chord track. We could use the editor scale, which could be defined, and then we could snap the pitch editing, and then the chord track mode, we could do it to scales, chords, or chords and scales. All right, so the next question we had, hello Greg, could you please help me out? How do I record MIDI in Cubase with zero quantize? I don't want Cubase to quantize my MIDI at all, just to record it at my pace and timing. Please, can you help out? So the only time that Cubase will actually record quantize information is always going to record it without quantize information by default. So let's come over here, and let's create a new project here, and we'll load up a quick instrument. All right, and I'm going to now come over here and add an audio track. And I'm going to set the grand as the instrument, so we'll record audio and MIDI simultaneously. All right, so as we come over here, so if I have this set to AQ and my quantized value is set to quarter notes, this will quantize my MIDI. So we'll put on our, all right, so I'll hit record. Now I would set to quarter notes. If I go, all right, so now at this point when I play it back, I kind of played eighth notes. That's quantized to quarter notes because I had AQ on. All right, so let me go ahead and record again, and I'll record the audio and MIDI simultaneously. So if I come here and record, okay, so now when we look at it, none of the MIDI information was quantized at all. So if we look at it, we could come right over here and we can see that none of the notes are quantized. So Cubase isn't quantizing your MIDI data at all unless you have this AQ button turned on. Now, even if we had the AQ button turned on, so I'm going to turn this on again, and we'll record both the audio and MIDI simultaneously. So let's say my quantized value again is set to quarter note. All All right, so now we could have the audio that's passed. But now, even though the MIDI here has been quantized to quarter notes, even though we played roughly eighth notes, you can always go back to your quantize, go to advanced if you just come right over here and choose reset quantize. And now we'll see that the audio and the MIDI will line up. So even if you accidentally recorded with the quantization turned on, you can reset the quantize and undo that. All right, let me see if there's another quick question we get in before we have to wrap up in just a couple minutes. So I have to do a seminar in about 30 minutes. I'll do like 5 hours of live streams today. All right, give me just a second. All right. See if there's any quick questions. All right, so we see Ali Dinesh says, hey, hi Greg, hope you're doing well. Just wanted to say something about the note expression, or as they say, MPE. Cubase had it for so many years, but needs an update to work easier. Is Ableton and Bitwig, which are so much easier to use. Is there an update to that to make it easier to work? Let me know what you have problems with, but you know, it's been working reliably for years for people. See if there's one last question before we wrap up. Okay, I think I'm just about out of time. So again, we'll be doing this next on Friday. We'll do our normal 4 hours. We will also, and 1 week from today will be the last live stream of the month because of the Thanksgiving holiday in the United States. So next Tuesday will be our Zoom social meetup. And so again, Friday and Tuesday, the following Friday, we won't have a live stream because it's the day after Thanksgiving or Black Friday for people that aren't in the US. So it's plug-in sale day. So we won't be having a live stream because it is a holiday here. And we should go through, like, probably get until maybe, like, you know, the last week before, you know, a few days before Christmas. We'll do a number of live streams in December. And with that, let me...
This is a reminder.
All right, that's my...
I don't see a grinder in your smart home center.
All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I have to get logged in for my next webinar. But I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. I hope that people have learned a new tip or trick. And if you have any questions, you can send them via email to clubcubase@steinberg.de or just simply ask them in the next live stream. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you on Friday. Goodbye.